Welcome back to iBosch USA Certificate and Permit Work Part 10. Now let's discuss risk assessment and hazard identification procedure. The risk assessment and hazard identification procedure for work at height activities involves systematically identifying potential hazards, assessing associated risk, and implementing measures to control or mitigate those risks. Now let us discuss the step by step guide to conduct a risk assessment and hazard identification for work at height. As a first step, we need to gather information. Collect relevant information about the work at height activities, including nature of the work to be performed, location of work area, equipment and material to be used, environmental factors such as weather conditions, past incident reports or near miss related to similar activities should be collected in the first step, that is gathering information. The second step is identifying hazards. Conduct a thorough inspection of the work area to identify potential hazards that include fall from height, whether unprotected edge is there or not, openings are there or platforms, is there any unstable surface, is there any improper scaffolding or ladder in use that we have to check, is there any possibility of falling objects such as tools, materials or debris falling from the above, and we must check the structural integrity, stability of elevated structures such as buildings, scaffolds or platforms. We need to consider environmental factors such as weather conditions, whether it is windy or raining, and we need to consider presence of hazardous substances such as chemicals, gases, etc. We need to consider equipment and machinery related factors, malfunctioning or improperly maintained equipment or electrical hazards we must consider. We must consider human factors such as adequacy of training, whether the worker is facing any fatigue, is there any possibility of distraction that we need to consider while identifying hazards. The third step is assessing the risk. Evaluate the likelihood and potential consequences of each identified hazards. When we assessing the risk, consider factors such as frequency and duration of exposure to the hazard, severity of potential injuries or damage, existing control measures and their effectiveness, and vulnerability of workers and other individuals in the vicinity. The fifth step we have to consider, that is risk prioritization. Prioritize risk based on their severity and likelihood of occurrence. Focus on addressing high risk hazards first, followed by moderate and low risk hazards. Then we need to implement controls. While implementing controls, develop and implement control measures to eliminate or minimize identified risk. Developing and implementing control measures include engineering controls such as physical barriers, guardrails, or safety net to prevent the falls. Ensuring that structural integrity of scaffolds are intact and even platforms are stable. While implementing control measures, we must consider administrative controls, means establishing safe work procedures, providing adequate training and supervision, enforcing use of personal protective equipment. And while implementing controls, we must ensure the provision of personal protective equipment. For that, we need to provide and ensure proper use of fall protection equipment such as harness, lanyards. Even we must ensure the provision of personal protective equipment such as helmets and other PPE. The sixth step is review and monitor. Regularly review and monitor the effectiveness of the implemented control measures. Adjustment may be necessary based on changing work conditions, new hazards, or lesson learned from incident or near misses. The seventh step, that is the final step, that is documentation. Document the risk assessment process, including identified hazards, assess the risk, control measures, and any follow-up action taken. This documentation helps ensure accountability, facilitates communication among workers, and serves as a reference for future work at height activities. See, by following this risk assessment and hazard identification procedures, organization can systematically identify and mitigate risk associated with work at height activities, thereby enhancing safety and minimizing the likelihood of accidents or injuries. A regular review and update to the risk assessment process are essential to adapt to changing conditions and maintaining a safe working environment. Now let us discuss permit issuance, authorization, and closure procedure. By following a systematic permit issuance, authorization, and closure procedure, organization can ensure that hazardous work activities are conducted safely in compliance with regulations and with appropriate risk management measures in place. During permit issuance, the individuals or team responsible for performing the work must submit a permit application detailing the scope of work, location, duration, and associated hazards. The designated person must review the permit application to ensure that all necessary information is provided and that the proposed work activities are adequately assessed for risk. Upon review, if the permit application meet all the requirements and comply with the safety regulations and procedures, the permit issuer approves the permit for issuance. The approved permit is issued to the individual or team responsible for performing the work. The permit contains information such as the permit number, authorized personnel, work location, duration, and specific conditions or requirements. Now, permit authorization. The individual or team receiving the permit reviews the permit conditions and ensure that they understand and agree to comply with all requirements before commencing the work. The permit receiver seeks authorization from the authorizing officer or supervisor designated in the permit work system before initiating work activities. Authorization may involve signing the permit or obtaining verbal approval, depending on organizational procedures. The authorizing officer must verify that the permit conditions are met, necessary safety precautions are in place, and all personnel are adequately trained and equipped before authorizing work to proceed. Now, the third step is closure of permit. Once the authorized work activities are completed, the permit receiver must ensure that all equipment is properly secured, work areas are cleaned, and any waste or debris is appropriately disposed of. Whatever changes we made at the workplace is reverted back to normal. After that, a final inspection may be conducted to verify that the work has been completed as per the permit condition and there is no any remaining safety hazards. The permit receiver must sign off on the permit to indicate that work has been completed and notifies the permit issuer of the closure. The permit issuer may then close the permit in the permit work system, indicating that the work is officially concluded. The work is officially concluded. Finally, documentation and record keeping. All action related to permit issuance, authorization, and closure must be documented in the permit work system or on the physical permit itself. Records of permit activities, including permit application, permit approval, authorization, and closure, must be maintained for compliance, audits, and for future reference purposes. By following a systematic permit issuance, authorization, and closure procedure, organization can ensure that hazardous work activities are conducted safely in compliance with the regulation and with appropriate risk management measures in place.